Divorced Redditors, what's the craziest thing you or your former spouse did after divorce? Story 1. My ex-husband started dating his stepmom, who has been in his life since he was 11 years old, and they are still together almost 5 years later. His stepmom confessed her love for my ex to his dad a few years ago, and they have since divorced. The dad is now dating a 21-year-old. I know all of this because I'm still close friends with my ex-husband's sister. It's so messed up, and I'm so grateful I left him when I did. Edit. Here are the highlights. Won't say where it all unfolded, but they are all from New Jersey, while I am not. The father and my ex-husband don't speak. Basically, everyone in that family, except stepmom, obviously, hates my ex-husband and has cut him mostly out of their lives. It may have been a little grooming, but if you met my ex-husband, you'd see he's all around a plotting, manipulative person. So I think it was the other way around. Story 2. My ex-wife told me I could leave my stuff in our house while I found somewhere else to stay. I assumed this was a goodwill effort to keep things as amiable as possible between us. When I went to get my stuff, she had burned it all, so that was rough. Story 3. The kids during their weekend visit and moved to a small town in the next state over. It took me 2 years to get them back. Edit. I did get them back. She eventually burned all her bridges in the town she moved to and went home to her parents' house. Since her parents were not pleased with her choices and were on my side during the whole deal, they called me to let me know where she was. I went and got them. This was over 20 years ago, and they have both grown up just fine. I've since remarried, and my second wife has been a wonderful mother to them. It took a lot of work to fix all the damage, but it's mostly okay. The biggest scars that lasted were that my son has a distrust of women with authority that he has worked really hard to get over. And my daughter was afraid to start her own family because she worries she would turn out just like her mom. She finally got over that and is expecting our first grandbaby this fall. Story 4. While we were still married, she gets pregnant with the guy she was cheating on me with, who is also married to someone else. She has this idea that he's going to leave his wife and they're going to get married. She got a lawyer and filed for divorce. I got a lawyer too. Only thing is that he works for his wife's father, who is setting him up to take over when daddy retires. He realized that getting a divorce means his cushy career is over, confesses everything to his wife, and begs for her forgiveness. His wife takes him back, and he cuts off my wife. Seeing that her dreams of living with her boyfriend are over, she claims that I'm the father, which is impossible because by that time, we hadn't had sex for more than a year before conception. This does not stop her from telling everyone who will listen that it's my kid. She has her lawyer drop the divorce proceedings. I tell my lawyer to start them with me as the plaintiff and that I want to dispute paternity. I moved out and she then began stalking me, shows up at my job and tries to get in. I work as a civilian and R&D at a military base. The MPs do not take any of her shit and wind up detaining her when she tries to run past the gate. She calls me at work to bail her out or something. I tell her that whatever she's done, it's not my problem, and hang up. I was also able to get a restraining order, which she violated repeatedly. She asked for everything, both cars, the entire house and contents, savings, my retirement account, etc., plus 7 years of spousal support. I offered no support and half of the assets. If she wanted the house, she'd have to buy me out and refinance in her name only. When the kid was born, she tried to put my name on the birth certificate anyway, but I'd already successfully disputed paternity, so that didn't go over well. She had to go after Loverboy, who was definitely less than happy to see her. In the end, we split the assets 50-50, sold the house, and she got no spousal support. I don't know if she was able to get money for the kid from Loverboy or not. She called me a few times after the divorce, wanting to get together and talk. The calls were in violation of the restraining order, but I never reported it. About 6 months after the divorce was final, I was offered a new job on the other side of the country. I took it and never told anyone outside of my family where I was going. Almost all of our friends believed her when she claimed the baby was mine and made me out to be the so I didn't really feel the need to tell them anything. Oh yeah, in my opinion, it's sad to see how messy relationships can get, especially when infidelity is involved. It's great that you were able to stand your ground and not give in to her unreasonable demands. Moving away and starting fresh seems like the best decision for you, and I hope things are much better for you now. Story 5. Called me and pretended he had been hit by a car while we were talking. He even tried to voice the crowd that had gathered around his body. God-awful acting, but pretty funny listening to him try to mimic a woman's voice. Points for trying to be inclusive, I guess. I think he was trying to get me to relive my trauma of being on the phone with a friend who actually had been hit by a car while we were talking. Too bad he didn't realize that hearing the real thing is worlds different than hearing a try to act it out. Reply 1. This is hilarious. My ex-boyfriend also faked being hit by a car after our breakup, but was at least smart enough to do it via text rather than try to act it out on the phone. I asked him to send me a photo of himself in the hospital, of his hospital bracelet, or anything that would prove he was actually in the ER. He didn't respond for about 20 minutes, then sent a selfie of himself standing outside of the hospital that was, what a coincidence, almost exactly 20 minutes away from his favorite bar. I questioned why he wasn't inside the hospital, since he'd only claimed to have arrived there around 45 minutes ago, and he claimed to have already been evaluated, treated, and released, without any discharge paperwork he could show me. Story 6. The final straw that led to the divorce. Got drunk and drove her car into the middle of the desert. Sent her friend a picture of the GPS and said I didn't love her, so I wouldn't come and look for her. She wouldn't answer my calls, but kept calling her friend, saying I didn't care. I looked for 2 hours before going back home because I needed to work in the morning. She came home and started banging things around, and came into our room and threw her phone at me saying I didn't love her, punched me in the face multiple times, and went to jail. After I filed for divorce, she lost it. CPS wouldn't let her kids stay at the house because of the DV charge against her, so they stayed at her parents'. She purposely stayed at the house so that I couldn't see my kids. I refused to be alone with her for fear that she would hurt herself and blame me, so I always went to the house with someone if I needed anything. She got tired of this and decided to just remove everything from the house while I was at work. I mean everything that wasn't in my kids' bedrooms, she took out of the house. Curtains, ceiling fans, all of the furniture, minus the dining table that I don't think she had room for. I thought, well, this sucks. But at least she's gone. So I changed the locks. She broke in and stole the locks the next day while I was at work, leaving nothing but the holes in the doors to swing open in the wind. Took the window locks and cut the power cord to the garage door opener. Took the blender that I borrowed from my mom and popped the air mattress that I borrowed to sleep on. Then she flipped off the main breaker to the house. Swore to the judge that someone else must have done it. Story 7. My 3 boys from my house when I went on my first post-divorce date. Our loved and trusted babysitter was with them. I left dinner ready, and the kids were bathed and were ready in their jammies. Left for the movie theater when I got a text from my babysitter that she was sorry for not doing the dishes after dinner. So I texted back, "That's okay, I can do dishes later, but you've got a couple of hours as well. The movie hasn't started yet." She was at home as my ex-husband had shown up, lied, and said he was supposed to have the boys that night and that I had said it was all right. So I was livid. I knew he was a bit crazy, but I had no idea he was capable of this. I stepped out of the theater, called him, and he said, "If you are going to be dating strangers and endangering the lives of my kids, I will take them." So I called the police. They did a report, we went to court, and he was found in contempt for violating our parenting plan. People like that want the rights, but not the responsibilities of being a parent. They're the type to have very little with hands-on parenting, but gush over their little darlings all over social media for likes. Story 8. All I wanted was custody of my son. I gave her everything else, except one of our cars. She fought me through 5 hearings, and I won. She never came to see him again. Story 9. She got custody of our 3 kids, got 70% of my take-home pay for child support, requiring me to move into the barracks, I was in the USAF. Then she immediately moved out of state without telling me, despite the divorce decree requiring my consent. all but guaranteeing I would have no contact with my kids. However, that's not the crazy part. The crazy part is, just a few years later, she decided she didn't want to be a mother anymore. So she signed up with a carnival. I think she had the hots for one of the ride operators and left the girls on their own without telling me or the girls beforehand. She called my oldest daughter a few days after leaving to tell her to call me. They hadn't called me before that because they had apparently grown accustomed to their mother disappearing for days at a time. Edit. This was decades ago. Since then, my children are all grown and married with their own children. They all learned after coming to live with me that I wasn't the monster their mother had brainwashed them to believe I was. And they all agreed to be adopted, as adults, by the light of my life, my wife, whom I would never have met if I hadn't been divorced. Only one of my children has any contact with her mother, mainly because my daughter still lives near where she grew up. That's where her husband and his family live, so that's where she'll stay. The best outcome of all of my children had the best example in the world of how not to be a mother, and consequently all of my grandchildren are having the best childhoods possible. It's unbelievable how someone could abandon their own children like that, especially after fighting for custody. It must have been heart-wrenching for you to be separated from your kids and not know what they were going through. However, it's amazing how things turned around and you got the chance to be there for your children and give them the love and support they needed. Story 10. My ex stole a car and did 18 months in state prison. Based on what I was able to find online at the time, he approached a car dealership and showed interest in buying a vehicle. They allowed him to take it home for a 24-hour demo. He never returned it. They reported it stolen after they attempted multiple times to contact him to return it. They then contacted the state police, who put a bolo out. They found him driving the vehicle on the other side of the state where he thought he wouldn't be found. I found out when I got an unexpected phone call from the sheriff's office. They said my ex told them I would vouch for them as a character witness. I told the officer over the phone that my ex was a lying sack of shit and shouldn't be trusted. The officer laughed, thanked me for my time, and hung up. Story 11. Completely ignored our 3 children for the last 10 years while living with a woman and her 3 children. Did I mention our oldest is his from a previous relationship, who I was awarded custody of, and he is her only living biological parent? Story 12. This was from even when I was a kid and my parents were going through a divorce. My dad was a total sociopath, manipulative, physically and emotionally abusive, drug dealing, the whole 9 yards. Even though my mom was finally able to get out, he still had visitation rights. His family kept on bugging my sister and me, still under 10 years old, to try to convince my mom to talk to him. She finally did try to talk to him when she came to pick us up at the police station, from where it was agreed to meet when he had his time with us. They immediately got into an argument. He started throwing one of his temper tantrums, grabbed my mom in front of a cop from the LAPD, trying to beat her. Then the cop grabbed him. He let go of my mom with a look of pure terror on his face. I think that was the day I realized he was sociopathic and didn't want anything else to do with him and his crazy-ass Bible-thumping family. Story 13. Or euthanized our dog, then lied that he had passed away of natural causes. The dog was old and blind, but bitch pleaded that she wanted a weekend with him, and then the next night she sent me a fake text that he had passed away during the night at like 3 a.m. because he coughed and then just stopped breathing. That wasn't true. I found out later after finding and calling the vet she had brought him to that she had badmouthed me, and that he was suffering and needed to be put to sleep because he was in agony, and I was supposedly letting him suffer. She had him out to sleep like the day she took him home, like 3 hours afterward. Never got to say goodbye due to that bitch. Story 14. We were living in a different state, and she wanted to move back to her home state a year into our marriage. I really had nothing tying me down in that state, so I was down for moving if that's really what she wanted. It had been about 6 months into the move, and she cheated on me with a coworker while I was working full-time and trying to finish up my bachelor's degree. She tells me that she didn't feel the same way about me and that she needed to move out to do some thinking. It's driving me insane trying to think about what could have gone wrong. I had a suspicion about that coworker, but I didn't have any proof. I checked our phone account online, and sure enough, they were talking every night after work while I was out working. I followed her one time, and sure enough, she was going to this guy's house. I confronted her about it, and she finally fessed up. So they continued dating after we finally divorced, and I was able to move on with my life. She ends up getting pregnant by this guy, and he disappears before their baby is even born. Karma definitely came back to bite her after the hell she put me through, all alone in a new state with no friends or family around. Yeah, it's really unfortunate when trust is broken in a relationship, especially after you made the effort to move to a new state for her. I can imagine how tough it must have been to find out about the cheating and deal with the emotional turmoil. Story 15. Here's a more wholesome and true one. He had Sunday dinners with my mom for many years after our divorce. He never had a real mom, long story, so I didn't mind sharing mine as long as I didn't have to be there. Story 16. I had a 1969 Dodge Power Wagon pickup with no power steering, no power brakes, and a 4-speed manual transmission 4x4. A beast of a truck and a beast to drive. But when we divorced, she took it. Judge said she was giving me custody of our 3 kids, and I would need the family car. It seemed only right that she got my truck. Several weeks after finalizing, she was going down a muddy road and ditched it, even damaging some of the front suspension. She called the local guy with a tow truck, and he towed it back to where she was living. Since she needed a car, he told her he traded her a Chevy Citation for the broken-down truck, which she agreed to. He then called me and sold me the truck for the cheap price he originally had on the Citation. I loved it. Had to spend a couple $100 on repairs, but she was freaked and pissed when she learned I got my truck back. Story 17. The divorce was fairly amicable, but he met a woman on the internet and moved into her apartment a month later. She hated seeing me because I had hurt him, but was also apparently still in love with him. Spoiler, I was emphatically not. She decided getting my son removed from my custody would solve all her problems. So she called my work and made ridiculously false allegations to my administrator about my conduct with students, but sounded drunk/high and wouldn't leave a name or contact information. Admin pulled her number from the caller ID, and X confirmed that it was Heifer's Oregon phone number. I had to get a temporary protective order for her, so my ex had her move out. Then she slashed my tires on Mother's Day. He confirmed that one after they broke up. He kept dating her for another year even though he knew about everything. My therapist at the time told me that my ex probably found her behavior flattering. Story 18. Continuously texted at all hours, threatening to take his own life, so I would rush over to do a welfare check, and he'd open the door with a smile. Hey, since you're here, want to come in for a beer or set? Hard pass. Starting up, I rush over, he's nowhere to be found. I'm calling his parents and friends. Turns out he was just at a bar. Another time he left a funeral playlist and a note, disappeared off the face of the earth for almost a day, and reappeared so drunk he almost ran into the house. After that, I just couldn't take it anymore. So the next time he started texting, I warned him that I would call the police if he was being serious, but I wasn't coming to check. He went 0 to 100 real quick about how he'd be lifeless before they got here, etc. So I called them, and he ended up getting 5150'd for the night. Very upset with me the next day, demanding a ride, and so on. I hung up, called his mom, and said, not my mess anymore. Here's the address. So then he just found new ways to torture me for a few years, but that one stands out the most. Story 19. Left me in the middle of the night, just packed all his shit and disappeared. Absolutely nothing led up to this. We didn't have the best relationship, but we had a pretty good few weeks and a really good day that day. He shows back up hours later for something he forgot and asks if he can take my iPhone charger. Are you kidding me? Get the f*** out of here. I still have abandonment issues to this very day, and it has negatively impacted every relationship I've had since then because I haven't been able to really let my guard completely down with anyone in fear of being suddenly left again. romantic, and platonic. Plus, I now get extreme anxiety and start to freak out if I haven't heard from them for a while. The icing on the cake? While cleaning out the rest of his shit weeks later, I found a list of all the things he was planning to take with him. On that list was my turtle. My pet turtle. Not ours, mine. That's been with me since high school. Please leave your story down below in the comments. I would absolutely love to make a video about them in the future. And also, don't forget to like and subscribe. And until next time, peace.